Welcome back to Global Lens. The Trump administration has given India a 21-day window for further negotiations. Sources have said that the Indian government is working towards finding a solution, and it is aiming for a win-win deal. Let's now go across to Senior Advisor, USISPF, and former Assistant USTR, Mark Linscott. Mark Linscott, thank you very much for joining us on the program. What do you think at this stage will really clinch a deal with the Trump administration?
Thanks, Parikshit. So what would clinch a deal? It's hard to say. We've been predicting one for weeks now. I was certain one would take place roughly 3 or 4 weeks ago, and obviously I was wrong about that. But, I think that there are two clear elements now. There is the trade deal itself associated with the reciprocal tariffs, which is now at 25%. We've got a little bit of a roadmap for a trade deal. We've got the deals that were struck with other countries, Vietnam at 20%, Philippines and Indonesia at 19%, but we have lower rates for countries that I think are more in a position like India, and that's Japan at 15% and EU and South Korea at 15%. So, I think the two sides should be looking at that kind of model. I think it's possible. I think a lot of progress has been made to date, and they should build on that, and probably at the leader level. The second part of it now is the new complication, one we weren't anticipating 8 or 9 days ago, and that relates to purchases of Russian oil. That's in the mix now. We had the announcement of a 25% tariff yesterday. It's pretty remarkable. Additive at 50% plus MFN rate, so 50 plus percent against India. That will have to be resolved one way or another. The good news, and it's a bit ironic at this point in time to refer to good news, is that we do have a now 20-day reprieve. President Trump has announced that he's planning to meet with Putin, which is progress on that front. So there is a window of opportunity for the United States and India to get together and figure these two broad categories out. And again, I think it's going to require high diplomacy. It's going to require likely leader level engagement, some kind of communication between the two.
Right. India has been saying, Mark, that we will go and buy oil wherever we get the best prices. We're doing it with the U.S. as well. We can increase our supplies from U.S., but we cannot cut off ties with Russia altogether. Will this cut ice with Donald Trump? And if he were to get some assurance from Putin, do you think he'll pull back on India?
I think it requires more than that. I think it's going to require some creative thinking and creative diplomacy on both sides between the United States and India. We did have the precedents in the first Trump administration and then moving into the Biden administration on Iran and Venezuela. I mean, it appears that there can be the ability to shift purchases around. I don't know that there's an expectation that that India would cut off purchases overnight. That seems unrealistic. But if a plan were provided that works for India, I mean, that is the key point. It has to work for India. It has to work in terms of keeping energy prices down for Indian consumers. I believe there's got to be space for a compromise on that issue.
Right. So you mean to say U.S. should be able to provide energy to India at competitive prices?
Well, you're venturing into territory that I'm not an expert on. I'm the trade guy, as you know well. So, I'm not in a position to give you, an expert analysis on oil prices and energy prices around the world and how they adjust with respect to each other. But I still believe that there's got to be a creative space for for an understanding here that recognizes, that acknowledges India's situation, yet responds to a primary objective of the president to put the pressure on Putin in terms of striking a deal on Ukraine.
Right. Also, when it comes to this 50% tariff, this comes into effect on the 27th of August after 21 days, like you said. We begin the 6th round of trade negotiations on 25th is when the US negotiators are coming. So do you think this has been strategically timed to make sure we get some sort of agreement from India in those 2 days, 25th and 26th?
I don't think it's necessarily tied to the plan, which has been in place, in fact, been in place well before the Truth Social post by the president last Wednesday on Russian oil and his threat to impose tariffs, a penalty tariff, which he's now followed through on. I don't think that there's necessarily any connection there. The larger aspiration, the ambition of the two countries, as laid out by leaders in February, to negotiate a comprehensive bilateral trade agreement. That's a process. That's a long process of negotiation. They've only just started to try to conclude an interim agreement on tariffs and I think the priority non-tariff barriers. But they've got a lot of additional ground to cover: trade and services, intellectual property rights. There are lots of rules areas to cover. So I think the plan to have a delegation at the end of August relates specifically to the broader bilateral trade agreement. The real window, though, I think, is specifically relating to the imposition of the Russian tariffs, the tariffs associated with Russian oil. I mean, that's the key moment. That's the key trigger point. And this is,
Right.
this is roughly 3 weeks to try to get it all done.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us. So critical time, and we're in the first day of negotiations now. Let's see what happens in the days to come. Thanks once again for being with us. On final